This lesson today is all about the midpoint formula and how to find the midpoint of two existing points. And when we're talking about midpoint, just think of it as the middle. So if you had 2 points on a graph and you wanted to find the exact middle point between those 2 points, that's called the midpoint. And there are a number of times in math and in this class where we're going to want to find the point that is exactly in the middle between 2 existing points. So there's a number of ways to do that. The most common way is to go ahead and use what is called the midpoint formula. And we're going to be filling out section 2 in your Intro to Integrative Math 2 flipbook. Section 2, this is the top flat left side. So I've already filled in for you the title, midpoint formula, and you should see this question already pre-printed in your flipbook. What is the midpoint of point A, which is at 16,7, and point B, which is at 12, -3. Now notice they don't give you a graph here, they just give you the 2 points. And this kind of question, again, it's ideal to use the midpoint formula to calculate the point between points A and point B. Now technically you could get a graph and you could graph those 2 points and draw a segment between the 2 of them, and then there are some ways to find the midpoint without having to use the midpoint formula. But what if these numbers get really big? Like what if A is 160,7? Now you're not going to be able to create a graph big enough to plot your points and figure out the midpoint. So again, the midpoint formula is the easiest way to find the midpoint between points A and B. And I've taken the liberty to write down the midpoint formula for you. So to find the midpoint, we know that it's equal to the 2x values added together divided by 2, comma, so that'd be your new x value of your midpoint. And then the new y value would be found by adding the 2 y values together and dividing them by 2. Now I've already discussed the names of these values. I want to make sure, class, that you would say here that the midpoint is x sub 1 plus x sub 2 over 2, comma, y sub 1 plus y sub 2 over 2. And this gives you basically a new coordinate, an x value and a y value, and that's where your midpoint is going to be. Well, we got to figure out, where do we get x sub 1, x sub 2, y sub 1, y sub 2? Well, they come from our original points, which are up here in our question, and let's go ahead and label those. I'm going to label this, remember, point A, 16 is an x value, and for point B, 12 is an x value, and then for point A, 7 is a y value, and for point B, -3 is the y value. So remember how in the video regarding distance and the distance formula, we talked about this subnumber. This subnumber is used because if I asked you what's the value of x right now, you wouldn't know whether to tell me 16 or 12. So you need to know the difference between these 2 x values, and so we commonly use this subnumber. In this case, I'm going to call this x sub 1. That means I'll call this x sub 2. And then this one, because I used sub 1 over here for point A, I have to use the same subnumber for y. So y sub 1 and y sub 2. And again, remember, class, we talked about this in the distance formula video. I could have used 3 and 5, 7 and 9. I could have put x sub A, y sub A, and x sub B, y sub B. All we're doing here is just helping us to understand that these 2 numbers are different, and we want to make sure we label them with a different name so we can tell them apart. And this subnumber just tells the difference between these 2 x values. And now it makes sense. It's going to be easy to plug this in to our midpoint formula. Let's go ahead and do that. So the midpoint of point A and point B is going to be equal to x sub 1, which is 16, plus x sub 2, which is 12. And that whole thing is going to be divided by 2. That's our x value of our midpoint. And then the y value of our midpoint is found by adding y sub 1, which is 7, plus, remember the plus is part of our equation, so you have to write that down first. We're going to be adding y sub 2, which is negative 3. And that's going to be all over the value of 2. Let's close our coordinate parentheses. So far, so good. Let's go ahead and simplify this. Midpoint of A and B is equal to 16 plus 12, which is 28, divided by 2. There's our x value of our midpoint. 7 plus negative 3, that's the same as 7 minus 3. So 7 minus 3 is 4, and that's going to be divided by 2. And then we can go ahead and simplify those fractions because they both turn out to be whole numbers. So we'll simplify those. Get that equal sign. I got that messed up. I'll try to fix that for you. The midpoint is equal to 28 divided by 2 is 14, and 4 divided by 2 is 2. So our midpoint between points A and point B is going to be found at the coordinate 14, which is our x value, and 2, which is our y value.